Most Americans carry a retirement number in their head. $1 million, 800,000, maybe even less. But very few people can explain where that number actually came from, and that's a problem. Because retirement isn't about hitting a magic savings target. It's about replacing income for as long as you live. Today, let's slow this down and talk about how much money you really need to retire, and why most people guess wrong. The biggest misunderstanding about retirement is thinking in terms of a single number. People ask, how much should I have saved? But the better question is, how much income will I need every year for the rest of my life? Because retirement doesn't end after 10 years. For many Americans, retirement lasts 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years. That's a long time to fund without a paycheck. Over 15 years of working with people approaching retirement, I've heard the same question hundreds of times. Do I have enough? And the answer is never simple, because enough for one person is completely inadequate for another. Someone with $800,000 and low expenses might retire comfortably at 62 and never worry. Someone else with $1.5 million and high expenses might struggle to make it work past 75. The number itself doesn't tell you much. What matters is the relationship between that number and your actual life. Let's start with spending. Most people assume they'll spend much less in retirement. No commuting, no work clothes, no daily lunches out. And while some expenses do go down, others quietly replace them. Healthcare, insurance, housing maintenance, rising costs over time. For many retirees, spending doesn't drop. It changes. And this is where many retirement plans begin to break. I've watched people retire, thinking they'll live on 60% of their pre-retirement income. They believe that's conservative. Then reality sets in. Property taxes go up. Insurance premiums increase. Medicare doesn't cover everything. Prescriptions get more expensive. The car breaks down. The roof needs repair. Suddenly, that 60% feels tight. And within a few years, they're spending closer to 80 or 90% of what they used to spend. The problem isn't that they were reckless. The problem is that they underestimated how persistent expenses actually are in retirement. Now let's talk about income. In retirement, income usually comes from multiple sources: Social Security, retirement accounts, savings, sometimes part-time work. The mistake is treating savings as income. Savings are not income. They are a source of income. What matters is how much you can safely withdraw each year without running out. This is why two people with the same savings can have very different retirements. One withdraws too much, too early. The other plans carefully. Here's what this looks like in practice. Let's say two retirees, each have $750,000 saved. Same starting point. The first retiree withdraws $50,000 per year. That feels reasonable. It's less than 7% of the portfolio. But over time, that withdrawal rate becomes unsustainable. Market returns don't keep up. Inflation eats away at purchasing power, and by their mid-70s, the money is running dangerously low. The second retiree withdraws $30,000 per year. They supplement with Social Security. They live modestly but comfortably. Their portfolio lasts decades longer. They never feel the anxiety of watching their savings disappear. Same starting balance, completely different outcomes. The difference was not luck, it was structure. Now let's talk about the famous $1 million rule. $1 million sounds like a lot, and for some people, it is enough. For others, it's not even close. If you withdraw 4% from $1 million, that's $40,000 per year, before taxes. Add Social Security, and maybe that works. Or maybe it doesn't. It depends on your lifestyle, your health, your longevity, and your expectations. There is no universal number. The 4% rule has become shorthand for retirement planning, but it was never meant to be a guarantee. It's a guideline, a starting point. And in real life, retirement is far messier than any guideline can capture. Some years the market is up 20%. Some years it's down 15%. Some years healthcare costs spike. Some years family needs arise unexpectedly. A rigid withdrawal plan doesn't account for reality. The retirees who feel most secure are those who build flexibility into their income strategy. They know which expenses are fixed and which can adjust. They know when to pull back and when they can spend freely. That adaptability matters far more than hitting a specific savings target. Now let's bring time into the picture. If you retire at 65 and live until 85, that's 20 years of income. If you live until 95, that's 30 years. That extra decade changes everything. Your money has to last longer. Your withdrawals must be smaller. Your margin for error shrinks. This is why longevity is one of the biggest risks in retirement. Not market crashes, not inflation alone, outliving your money. I've worked with retirees in their 80s who are watching their savings dwindle and feeling genuine fear about what happens next. Not because they were irresponsible, not because they made terrible decisions, but because they lived longer than they planned for, and their original retirement calculation didn't account for that extra decade. When you're planning for retirement, you're not just planning for the early years when you're healthy and active. You're planning for the later years when healthcare becomes more expensive, when long-term care might be necessary, when your ability to adjust and adapt decreases. Those later years are when the plan either works or falls apart. So how should you think about your retirement number? Start with annual spending. How much will you realistically need each year to live comfortably? Not perfectly, but comfortably. Then subtract guaranteed income, Social Security, pensions if applicable. What remains is what your savings must cover. That gap, multiplied over decades, is your real retirement challenge. And this is where most people underestimate. They underestimate health care. They underestimate longevity. They underestimate how much flexibility they'll want later. Let me give you a concrete example. Someone retires at 65 expecting to spend $50,000 per year. Social Security provides $25,000. That leaves a $25,000 gap. Over 20 years, that's $500,000 their savings must cover. Over 30 years, that's $750,000. And that's assuming no inflation, no unexpected costs, no long-term care needs. In reality, you need to add a significant buffer for all of those unknowns. This is why people with what seems like plenty of money sometimes still feel anxious, because they've done the math, and they realize how little room for error actually exists. Retirement planning isn't about guessing right, it's about planning conservatively. Because running out of money late in life is far more painful than working a little longer. I've never met a retiree who said, "I wish I had saved less," but I've met plenty who said, "I wish I had saved more. I wish I'd waited longer. I wish I had been more careful early on." That regret is heavy. This is why people with enough money sometimes still feel anxious. Their plan wasn't built for uncertainty. A strong retirement plan doesn't rely on everything going perfectly. It leaves room for mistakes, for surprises, for longer lives. So instead of asking, "Is my number big enough?" ask this: "Does my plan still work if I live longer than expected? Does my plan still work if the market underperforms for 5 years? Does my plan still work if healthcare costs double?" Those are the questions that reveal whether your retirement is truly secure. Because in the end, retirement isn't a finish line. It's a decades-long journey. And the people who navigate it best are those who plan not for the best-case scenario, but for the most realistic one. In future videos, we'll break down withdrawal strategies, the biggest Social Security mistakes, and why some retirees feel secure while others don't, even with similar savings. No hype, no fear, just clarity. Because in retirement, it's not about hitting a number, it's about sustaining a life.